Hello everyone and welcome back to the MMO development class meeting number 8. This is our third part in the session. We're going to pick right back up, I believe somewhere right before we went to break. Zach Garmer had called you lazy. You asked, why do you say? And he gave you a result in there if you want to read that back.
Said going to an overused system just because you can't think of something better. Overused things are boring. And I thought we were going to revolutionize and do something different. That's great. We could do everything different. The game could have no levels. It could be about sweeping cobwebs out of corners because no MMO has ever done that before. Your character could actually be an octopus wearing a baseball cap because I've never seen that in an MMO before.
I have.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
No, if we're talking anime, that I think has been done. So
Hey, that's what I'm saying.
But I'm just saying, at some point, you cannot, and this is just my opinion, if I'm totally the wrong guy, I don't mind pulling out and just saying, fine, do it. But really, you can't just take every convention out there for role-playing games. Because remember, this is an MMORPG, not just massively multiplayer online game. We're still making an RPG here. You can't just say, well, that's a convention, everybody else is doing it, which means it must be different because we have to revolutionize everything. That's what happens when you say, all right, we're going to reinvent the wheel, and what you end up making is a blender. It's not going to help your car go forward.
And at the same time, I still have a hard time seeing where Zach was being lazy with us trying to flip the stones and look for the pros and cons and get feedback as to other alternatives.
And my whole point, what I was trying to get at before I was called lazy, was I have not yet heard a compelling argument to do away entirely with the concept of levels. As soon as I hear that argument, as soon as you convince me, then I'll be completely on board. But until that time, I'm going to be skeptical.
well, the trick is an alternative is going to still have to replace that proverbial carrot. You need to have something to entice your players to keep playing your game. You've got to give them the little rewards every, 30 minutes, every couple hours, whatever it be, so they still want to keep playing.
But why does that have to be in the form of a level? Why is that not kind of
That's
in
the point.
form of an in-game
What do you have
benefit?
as an alternative? If you come up with a convincing alternative that sounds cool, then we can look at it. But you can't just say, I don't want levels. Well, what do you want instead? I don't know. I just don't want levels.
No, I don't want
because we have to be different. We have to revolutionize it. If every MMO has it, then we have to do away with it so there's no levels. Great.
Yeah,
now what?
Why?
I think what Gav means is that instead of having levels, you would have another source of advancement that isn't a sort of your character magically gets better. He might get to know someone who can get him some better armor somehow. It might be the king.
Or can get you into a different part of the map. You know,
Yeah.
There's different ways that you can have essentially what it's kind of like as with most of the stuff that I'm pushing for this, it's essentially behind the scenes. If you kind of go into the computer, yes, okay, there's still levels, so not actually in terms of levels, less so, but more granular than that, going on with getting better at things, doing things more and such like. But in terms of how it's presented to the player, I really don't think that it's a given that you have to have levels. Because you keep saying, well, I haven't heard a compelling argument why I have to not have levels. What is a compelling argument for having levels?
Ooh, where shall I begin? Well, your character has your character has a very easy way of charting their progress of growth. Everybody who walks past you, who can be, assuming your level system is exposed to other players, immediately knows about how far along your character has developed. Just completely doing away with all of the other ways in which levels improve your stats, and just getting away from that. That alone gives you something to work toward. It gives you an instantaneous reward for making it to a certain point, and I don't care if it's based on experience points, or I don't care if it's because you rescued the princess from Bowser. Getting that level, attaining that level, gives you that sense of satisfaction. I have gone from a lesser state to a greater state because of something I have done, and that continues to happen. And because that number's increasing, that your character has improved in some manner.
But that's kind of what I mean. In fact, Portal you mentioned earlier is a perfect example of a game. You don't by that definition
Of a single-player game.
There's no fundamentally. whether it was a single player or multiplayer.
There are some massive differences you have to take.
Yeah, there are massive differences.
People seem to have a lack of. A lot of people I've heard don't seem to be grasping this.
The idea of levels, as far as I'm concerned, is a very fundamental reward system to drive characters, to drive players to continue playing their character. That's all it is. That's why I like it. And if you don't like it, that's fine. But you're going to have some way to reward your players for playing the game. And if you don't want to do it through levels, fine. I'll be done in just a minute. I'll be done in just a moment, I promise, and then I'll hand the floor back off to you. It doesn't have to be called levels. I don't care what we call it. But you're probably going to have a hard time getting away from the theme. Now, please, continue.
Again, it comes down to because you said, well, if we don't have levels, what do you replace them with? This is the thing. What I'm saying is that you don't need that. You don't need a replacement for levels. The idea you get to, it's kind of like you're basically trying to persuade. You're taking the basis as being that the game's not going to be worth playing unless the player somehow got what, for want of any more general term, a level to aim at. You've got another next level.
Some form of reward system.
Yeah, but the reward system in what I'm envisioning is that you get to play. A game should be its own reward.
But
any game should be its own reward. You don't play tennis, for instance, in order to get levels at tennis. You play tennis because tennis is an enjoyable thing to do. Any game is you should the reward for having played it is to be able to play it more and better.
Okay, so your idea, when you boil it down, is that there should be no such thing as character advancement.
Pretty much. Not quite that far, but it comes down to this idea that
basically you're taking on the fundamental character development mechanic of a first-person shooter, where the only thing that maybe changes is the gun you're firing. Other than that, you are just an entity which moves around and does a few things. But your character itself does not ever actually change and develop, correct?
To a certain... Yes. Okay, yes.
Yeah, I can't get on board with that. That's me.
Why?
That's me. And if everybody else says that that's the way an MMO should be in the future, that you just get on, and no matter if you've been playing for 2 years or you've been playing for 5 minutes, everybody's on the same level. If everybody outnumbers me and says that that's the way MMO should be, that's fine. And if that's the way MMOs go, I will quit playing all of them. But I'm just saying, I am open to the concept.
You would have progression, but it just wouldn't be.
No.
Get stronger.
Careful there, because as soon as you progress and you modify and improve your character, you've just replaced it with something exactly like a level.
No, you're not progressing and modifying your character. You're not. You progress because you have.
The example you gave earlier of getting a new item from somewhere or getting somewhere you weren't getting to before. That is, I can see where you're coming from in terms of progression.
Hang on. If that was the progression in WoW, all right, my turn for just a second. If that was the progression in WoW, that would really suck, because then someone just needs to go to a gold farmer, give them $50, get thousands of gold, turn around, get on the market, and buy the highest, most expensive epic gear, and now they have in 3 minutes of playing the
WoW
game.
Is designed to have around the whole level. This is.
If you have currency, you're going to have
WoW does not equal MMO.
Well, here's one.
You keep going, all right, let's
I don't even have to say WoW. That's just...
Yeah, we're just talking about RPGs in general.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make it very easy to understand in relationship to a very popular MMO. An example.
Obviously, if you take a changed system and put it into... people keep doing this. They go, oh yes, but if you try that, imagine WoW, but with that in place instead. Yeah, but
okay, hang on. Well, then it wouldn't be WoW.
It won't work. No.
Are you going to have currency in the game? Are you going to have currency?
Yes.
But are you going to be allowed to give friends currency?
There's progression there. Yeah.
Then you've got gold farmers, and now you've given that entire idea.
Because if there's no way to
extreme
restrict
challenges.
who can use what based off of either time in game that they've played, how much they've practiced a skill to advance it, or they've advanced their level. Now, I can see your point where it would be neat to have certain things that you have to accomplish in the game to unlock other areas, but a problem that I can see with that is for the people like yourself that says you want to be able to play a game solo. So what happens if there's an entire section of game that you can't access because you don't want to group with a group of people to achieve that goal?
I have no problem. I regard soloing as including running a group of NPCs, a la any BioWare game where you've got a multiple.
I do think that
group.
is a good option for group players.
Can't see why you wouldn't.
The Guild Wars.
That was the thing that, and particularly in Rift, they've really made it impossible not to join a group. That's what put me off it initially.
But see, a lot of the argument is that's the point of an MMO.
Yeah, but
Because
then they don't get my dollar. For simple as that.
And that's fine.
And that's fine because
and you may be more geared to playing single-player role-playing games, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, but my point is it is perfectly possible, as Chris points out, with Guild Wars was a perfect example. And frankly, any of these sort of games where you've got like a multi-role group, it's perfectly feasible for you to play it solo. I mean, I don't say and this comes down to a basic marketing point. Why would you deliberately set out to stop people playing the game?
Gav, I stopped playing Guild Wars because it felt like too much like a single-player game. I felt like the only time I saw other players was in the towns, and most of them were stupidly high level and far out of my range. That was another problem with Guild Wars.
You don't need levels.
I disagree. That's a good question. That's a good point. You are a role player in tabletop games, aren't you? And you've played many computer RPGs.
Yes.
Could you briefly outline your favourite experience that you had?
Neverwinter Nights 2.
Well, did Neverwinter Nights 2 have a level system? I am going to go past the point of, there you go.
Yeah. Yes, it did.
Right.
Obviously, it was a D&D game. It was a 3.5 ed system.
Right. Okay. Presumably, your enjoyment of that game. I've not played Neverwinter Nights 2. Presumably, there is a big, bad, evil guy who at the start of the game is ridiculously powerful for whatever reasons. For example, for whatever reasons, they're ridiculously powerful. And you start out as, a minor adventurer or some sort of... What do you start out as?
I mean, it's your typical D&D.
Yeah, but...
What are you getting at?
To change the analogy slightly, if you're an adventurer and you want to go kill that dragon, do you know what you're going to go do? You're going to train. You're going to train bloody hard. And you're going to get better at whatever it is that you do to go kill that dragon. And it's got nothing to do with what sword you pick up, or what bow you use, or what armor you're wearing. Now, obviously, in a game environment, that sort of training needs to be modified so it doesn't take months or years, because that isn't enjoyable for the player, because they don't have to sit down at the computer and grind for months to go do that thing they want. Now, I'm not saying there needs to be a certain amount of instant gratification, but I think there does need to be a marked difference between your previous state to your future state because of that euphoria element. So I don't think having advancement for the purposes of playing further in the game, for example, as you said, unlocking an area or gaining an item that makes your character better, will engage players. I think that the average MMO player who, might not be the best role player or the person we want to encourage playing, we do want to get more people playing MMOs in general. But there needs to be this euphoria moment that is more than just items, because that's, even in a tabletop game, it's an item is perceived as this cool thing you get that's just nice shiny, but what you're really after is that advancement.
The stat bonus.
I mean, have you ever played Exalted? or any other White Wolf product, such as Vampire the Masquerade or...
No.
Right. They have an XP system which has no levels. You get bonus points, which you spend on... Well, you get experience points, which you directly spend on abilities. And there's no leveling system. Your character starts at a set level, and certain advances cost certain things. When I played through that, because I've played several White Wolf games, I had a complete disconnect with my character because I didn't feel like I had anywhere that I was going with it. I ended up spending my points all over the place, completely undirected. And the main problem with that was I didn't have an in-depth knowledge of the world and of the game system. Because if I did, I'd know in Exalted, dexterity is a very key statistic. If you don't have high dexterity, you're going to get beaten on and you're going to get killed very quickly, which I did for my first 4 or 5 characters. So, I've slightly lost my point, but we don't want to have new players coming into the gaming world to have a certain base knowledge of it.
No, but that's what you present to them with a single-player game. I would suggest that because again, there's this problem of needing to get to the end game with another character, which usually involves playing through the campaign again, or going off and doing the silly things like jumping around and such like. But you present essentially, if you like, an extended education in the world. I mean, this is the thing. This is something that games in the fantasy universe generally have managed to avoid by assuming the prerequisite of you having some basic, Tolkien has become a part of the language, and the more so since the films. But it's where it all started, and I defy anyone to read every single page of those books because I know you hate
the military. I know you hate the military, but I'm just curious. I know you hate the military, but there's a level or a ranking system in education as well. You hate that too? I mean, because I can.
Does that mean like 6-year-olds should just go straight to college?
Right, yeah, even if they are retarded. Excuse me, I know that's not politically correct. I'm just saying.
Are you trying to push me somewhere in particular with this, Buzz, at all?
No, I was trying to search for an example that was different from the military, because I understand you hate the military, but you like education.
There is a certain amount of devil's advocate in this. I realise that the likelihood of us building a game with no levels is practically nil, just because I'm so clearly outnumbered. But
no, it's not.
You could say that, by the way, that's
Chris, hang on. But even with a weighted average, I think, at the end of the day. But people are... I want to get away from this idea. I mean, I have no problem with skills. My ideal system wouldn't have any levels, but it would have just the most ridiculously involved, complex skill tree that the player doesn't really see. He sees the effect of it. He sees that he's better at doing other things when he does them. That's the system that I would like, ideally, for myself. But... and so that's the corner I'm fighting. But I realise most of it won't happen. But I did want to push this particular point hard because it is something that has bugged me. Is this idea that if just
sure, I just want before it gets
to the way WoW works is something
we use that as an example, and you just haven't played WoW.
Everyone who's ever played, it's a computer games thing. It's become a paradigm. And the two aren't necessarily synonymous. There are other ways should at least be thought about, because just saying, but if you insert that, if you change that, too many discussions I've seen, and this has been in the forums, and I've heard people talking about it, that they all basically go, this would be a good idea of something to try, and then the other person says, yes, but you see, if you change WoW so it works like that, it doesn't work anymore, and that's because WoW doesn't work like that. And it isn't designed to work like that. No.
See, with the example I gave you a minute ago, I disagree with that. Because I asked you, are we going to have currency? You said yes. Will a friend be able to give another friend currency? Yes. Can we use the currency to buy stuff from the market? Yes. Then yes, it will be exactly like WoW as far as that goes. And there was a major problem with that. With if there was no levels and all, and it's just a matter of you go out and pick up the most awesome rifle, or then there is a problem. I was just pointing out and using that as an example. And also, I just wanted to go back to what Mike SDK said about the education thing. That's a skill-based system, not a level-based one. All depends on how you look at it. It really does. You know, I'm seeing skill-based is greater than level-based, and if you guys recall
education is also improved by doing.
I've said exactly, and I said that's how, if we had a level system in place, it should be to begin with. It should be more of what you've done, what you've experienced, just like I've talked about the skill system. Same exact idea. It's a matter of how much experience you've picked up.
See, yeah, this is. I think levels is it's like middle management. You don't need it there. If you've got skills, you don't need levels. You get better at the skills, and that because again, that also the whole. And I'm going to hate myself for doing this because I'm going to go back to Rift again, because that being what I've come across in this, but their big advertising thing was that it's a whole different way of doing things. Essentially, that was to paraphrase overly much. But the actual system that they put in place was incredibly constrained. If you spend a while going over the stats and you look at, well, there was still better, obviously better ways of building certain types of characters than others. And it comes down to this thing of, because they've got this extra level of abstraction in there that stops you. If you just take a purely skill-based system, and I'm talking massively multi-skilled, in it, and with the sort of getting better as you do them, or doing things to get better at them, whichever way you want to look at it, you don't need. You end up with being able to actually do what people always say they want to do, which is create the character they have in mind. And this is the thing that I have against all computer-based role-playing games ever made. It's the fact that it comes back to that L word again. But it's a question of it all seems to have stemmed from the hack and slash. Hack and slash is easier to make. Hack and slash, when they were making these games, was the best way to use the power available to them. But games have evolved from those games that were made with much weaker computers, rather than skipping that and going back to, we've got the ability now to do incredible amounts of calculations. These sorts of systems that are incredibly granular behind the scenes allow a much more natural progression. Progression could be progressing from much more like it is in the real world, whereby you do get better at things and you get worse at things, but not to the point where all of a sudden you go from being a normal human to being able to bench press a gorilla. Those sorts of
but humans can go from being absolutely that isn't beyond.
Yes, but not to the ludicrous extent of change that is almost necessitated by having levels. And the more levels
it's not
have,
but
the more it is, because if you're going to have a level system whereby you get better at things at certain levels, then if you're going to have 80 levels, then you're going to have to get a lot better, because you're going to have.
You said you have to have 80 levels. It could be 5 levels.
Well, absolutely, that's much more the way I would tend to go, because, and that's where it came. That I went from there to going, well, if we're reducing, down that far, actually makes, or it feels to me like a better way to go. Then if you take the actual levels out of it, and it still stands to me. And particularly with the sort of world that we're talking about building, which will be changing around the person. I mean, even just the village I live in, this tiny little village, has changed beyond all recognition in the time I've been alive. That sort of progression, that's why I mentioned, the ability to get to new places.
But you can't expect a player to play a game for however long however long that's been. You have to truncate this information into a smaller sort of.
Oh yeah, well, no, obviously, I'm not
and
talking
have
about
a-
one day in real life being equal to one day.
Oh no, I know. I know
What
you're
I'm
not.
saying is the amount of just the it doesn't need to be, it doesn't have to be a level progression. It doesn't have to be leveling up. It can be other things, and I just think. Oh yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I realise that Overmind converting reality into gameplay is very dangerous. But to me, it seems like a good basis, a place to start from.
Converting reality, I still stand by you level up in college.
Let me simplify this. I think
No,
you level up
improve your
all
skills
throughout.
in
I think
college.
you level up all throughout your life. It just doesn't have the steady number hash marks that a leveling system in an RPG does.
It's all relative in how you look at it, Nelson. Yes, you do. Because you quit school, there are so many places that you can try to apply for a job, and they're simply going to say no. But why? Because you haven't leveled up.
What I'm saying to you, Gavin, is that I think what you're saying is you'd like something that felt a little more fluid.
Well, not.
Okay, go ahead.
What I'm saying is that you don't need levels to have progression. You can have other types of progression. Just because I haven't been able to give dozens.
I feel so strongly like you're just in a semantical argument. Let me simplify things, or at least try to, so that I understand.
Well, I am. I agree.
Hang on, please. One moment. Do you want the character that you are controlling in the game to be able to grow and develop and improve from the moment you start playing the game forward? Do you want that growth to take place?
Yes.
Or do you want the character to start off at the exact same level that they're going to be at the end of the game? They just kind of stay the whole way throughout the entire... Is that what you want?
Yes.
Basically, like if we threw it into WoW terms, so everybody follows what I'm saying. You'd start at level 85 and always
So
hit level
Busby
85.
J's argument is hardly as one-sided as he portrayed it, huh? Nelson, hang on. The kinds of places that wouldn't look at me, I wouldn't fit in anyways.
That's some sour grapes.
That's sour, and I remember you saying, Jeff, get me a job at Epic, and I happen to know upper management, like the highest management there, and they would say no to you because you haven't even finished high school.
Yeah, let's get away from that real quick. I'm going to go ahead and just shunned.
That's for a break.
Yeah, I'll get back to you, Wolf Knightley, here in just a minute. So I asked you two.
The highest management doesn't decide who to hire. Well, you got a lot.
Right.
You got a lot to learn about certain companies.
Yeah, just quit showing your lack of experience.
Yeah,
in public, Nelson. Anyway, moving right along. I asked you two questions that were kind of like an either or, but it sounded like you said yes to both of them.
Yeah, but this.
So hang on, stop. Don't start talking yet. I'll ask you a question, then you can answer. All right. Do you want the character to improve over time or over gameplay? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, but then you also said that you wanted the character to already be improved as much as they could be at the start of the game.
No, I said I didn't want levels.
No.
I didn't like.
Okay.
I want them. I don't want there to be a gap between starting the game and there being an end game.
Then
wait a minute.
How do you quantify your improvement so that folks understand exactly how they've improved without question?
The same way we do in the West. More stuff, better stuff, pretty shiny stuff with buttons on it, and big cars with big wheels and big.
No, that's a cloudy concept. That's a cloudy concept because all you're saying there is that you would have access to more stuff. Nobody says you're absolutely going to get that stuff. So at what point? Hang on. Even in the real world, okay. You say how we do it in the West. That means I get more stuff. Great. Now I can go to a Ferrari dealership and I can buy a Ferrari. But what the first thing they're going to do is they're going to do a credit check on me to make sure that I have the appropriate credit. And that credit boils down to a number. They are literally going to look at a number to see if I qualify to get my hands on one of their cars. That number, my credit score, literally is a financial level. All I'm saying about the idea of a level, and you can look, if you're so against the idea of levels, let's call them marshmallows. I don't care if we don't call them levels. What I do care about is that if we have something like marshmallows in our game, we have an easy to see, readily available way to quantify this very cloudy progression you've defined throughout the way. And yes, Nelson, your credit system is based off of so many factors, but that's the idea of this gaming environment. We're trying to take a very cloudy system that goes off in a whole lot of different directions and boil it down to something that can be easily quantified so that not only can we track it, but we can keep it moving forward as the player plays.
Just like your credit score. It is a simple number.
That's why they made it a simple number. That's why it does. That's why they don't have to have your bank history, your work history, and all these other factors that come up on a gigantic binder. They delineated that and distilled it down to a single number that they can look at. They simplified it, and that's exactly what we need to do, as far as I'm concerned, is take this idea of character improvement over time, over gameplay, etc., and so forth, and boil it down to something you can understand right away. Fundamentally, the easiest way to do that is with a number. Unless you, and if you don't agree, that's fine. That's just the way I see it.
And money equals power, yes and no.
Okay, Nelson, how doesn't progression in skill trees work? No one said it doesn't. Here's the thing, though. If your progression in a skill tree, if by that you mean as you get more powerful, you're able to access more branches of that skill tree, or let's just picture your skill tree like a hierarchical list of blocks, and you can suddenly light up more blocks as you go, then the number of blocks you can access is suddenly analogous to, ding, 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 a number. So you could just as easily say that you have 16 blocks available in your skill tree, which I could argue you now have 16 marshmallows, Gav, not levels, but marshmallows.
Yeah, but I'm saying you always have access to all. I'm not seeing it like a skill tree so much as a parametric EQ, where
sure.
you get better at the things that you do, and the better you get at them, the better you're able to do them, and that gives you access to. It's not about, because again, this comes down to this whole thing of, all right, if we've got levels and we've got a level cap and we've got, or same with skills in this case, you go to the points you need. You've only have a certain amount of skill points you can spend. Riff, as for example, it doesn't matter how you go about it, you're still only got those 51 spaces to put points in. And I would much rather see a system whereby you don't have levels and you don't get, it's not, it's much more about that you get better at certain things or yeah.
I have certain skill sets which I've picked up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If I want to learn a new skill set, for example, I'm quite proficient in Unreal, in UDK, but I want to learn C#. Does that mean I have to unlearn UDK?
No.
Because in the system you described, it kind of means you have a set amount of skill points, right?
You don't.
And
this is what I'm saying. You should be able. You should. It should be. There should be. Obviously, there's going to be interaction between skills. Obviously, like for instance, there you've got transferable skills from in terms of UDK and another. You might have some experience of scripting that you can apply to programming in that particular example.
But then those points have to come.
You don't unlearn it, but as time passes.
But if you have a finite number of skill points, if you have a finite number of skill points,
why do you have a finite number of skill points?
You just implied that you wanted to have a finite number of skill points that you can place anywhere you want in this.
No, I was complaining about the fact that you have a finite number of skills. That's exactly the opposite of what I was saying.
Okay, then if you have an infinite number of skill points, right, which is the opposite, then what stops? Why wouldn't all your characters everywhere, every single character, be proficient in absolutely everything all the time?
Well, no. You don't have them all at once. What I'm saying is there's no point.
So then you have a progression.
There's no point where you can't. Yes, but there's no. That's what I was saying. That's why I said yes to both of Zach's questions. You've got progression. You don't have levels. You just get better at doing things, and ideally.
But how do you quantify when a character gets points? When do you give a character more skill points? At what point do you decide that they have done enough advancement to get a new skill point?
You don't. You give them 0.01% of advance. It's an analog thing. It's not a digital thing. You get better at doing the things you do, and as time goes by, when you don't do something,
so every now and again you have a cube.
Will you let me finish a sentence?
No, you never let me finish. No, go on, go on.
No, what I can't remember.
Yeah, you
I'm
can.
sorry.
Come on, Gavin. Come on.
No,
Hang on, Nato. Let Gavin finish. You can do it, Gavin.
What was I saying? I had no idea what I was saying.
Okay, go ahead, Nato.
Sorry, guys, I didn't mean to make you lose your point there.
Well, no, it's just, you know what? I have no idea what I was saying.
Gavin, I'm going to give you a free pass. As soon as you remember, just push Nato over and start talking, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, God, it's happened to me now.
Oh, dear God. Come on, guys. I'll fail.
Yeah, if you, like I was saying, you need to have a. So yeah, in the system, I think you seem to be implying characters would gain a skill point at some point during gameplay that they can then spend wherever they want.
No,
So they don't necessarily have levels, but they just accrue points.
Yes, but I mean, it's not a question of 1 point being a particularly big thing. It's you know.
I see what you mean.
I'm talking about 0.01, and your maximum would be a long. You know, it's a question of, you know, I'm pushing, as I said before, I'm pushing the use-based idea of if you do something, you get better at it, and if you stop doing it, then you eventually get worse. Obviously, and that should be a much slower process, if at all. You should at least remain stagnant. But I think personally that you would, by getting worse at something by spending time not doing it, and you could subdivide that into, so for instance, if you, the most glib example would be difference between ranged and melee weapons. You know, depending on which one you've got. I mean, this is, I imagine, how it's been done in various games behind the scenes from a calculation point of view, whereby whichever one you've got equipped, that is the one that you get improvement in. In fact, that is exactly the Guild Wars system, isn't it? Isn't it?
I think so. It certainly was, not to mention the monstrosity, but it certainly was in WoW until very recently.
And the reason I would say you need to get gradually, you get stale at things as you do in the real world, because that there is your balance, the way of balancing people so that you don't have ridiculous extremes, because it's a question of where you put the limits on how much time you need to spend doing something to improve it versus how much time you need to stop doing something. And equally, because there you've got specific, for instance, going between, say, C# and Python, which is something I've been doing a fair bit over the last few months, just jumping about between Houdini and other things. And those two actually really rub up against each other badly. It's like going from a PC to a Mac. In the old days, you used to keep right-clicking, and then, oh no, you've only got one mouse button. There's a prime example of two things where if you're doing one of them, the other, it would really have a knock-on effect on your ability to do the other. Whereas you have other things that are supportive, like, for instance, going from wielding a sword to wielding any other type of weapon. You still need to know where to hit someone in order to. That's kind of the way I would like to see it go, and I don't think yeah.
I think I get what you mean. This is one of the things that I.
Zach, do you have anything to jump in on there?
Or feel free to jump in on any of the other conversations.
There've been several different angles that I've been trying to keep under.
Zach, I'd like to go ahead and give you the floor for a while to start addressing some of these other things.
Well, Wolf Knightley has continued to bring up over and over that he'd like to see something more skill-based on what the player is and is not capable of with their mouse and keyboard. And I have a real problem with that in terms of role-playing games. If you're making an online Borderlands-style game where it's all about how well you can aim your mouse, zoom in, and shoot stuff, then I think that's great. I think that's totally the way you should go about it. But I think with a role-playing game, it's important to remember that you are playing a role. You have created a character that does not exist, and in some form or fashion, whether or not you're into the true hardcore role-playing, you are pretending to be that character. And what that character can and can't do should be a limiting factor in some way. That's the only way you keep... It's the only way you keep it to where that character has some form of growth. And I think we've already decided, whether we call it levels or whether we don't, whether it oscillates in some logarithmic curve or whether it has step numbers, whatever. We've already decided that we'd like the character to develop during gameplay. As soon as you put too much of an emphasis on player skill, you move away from what the character's actually doing. You diminish the importance of the character in gameplay, and I have a huge problem with that for role-playing games. Not with any other kind of game. For driving games, shooting games, stealth games, if I'm playing something like Splinter Cell, then I think it's fantastic, because I am deadly at Splinter Cell, and it has nothing to do with what my little Sam Fisher character can do on the screen. But with every role-playing game I've ever played, what my character is capable of, their strengths at the time, are a limiting factor to how well I can perform any given task, and I think that's the way it should be. Now, Wolf just said... Go ahead.
It's the classic example of how do you go about role-playing a character that's got a 20 intelligence.
Exactly, but there has to be some sort of a limiting factor, and that's actually one of the ways in which I really think computer-based RPGs, video game RPGs specifically, have just a tiny little advantage over tabletop games, because it is extremely difficult for some folks to role play that low intelligence character knight. I know that the rules of D&D tried to break it all down into dice rolls when you try to do something, but try to argue some of that stuff through with a game master, and there's always some something that comes up. And then Wolf Knowledge says, Zach, do you know like an action RPG game? It's as long as it has role playing game in it, then I think you've got to be just a little bit careful. Now, it sounds like, do I not like action RPG? I love action RPG games, Wolf. I've played many, many, many of them. At the same time, I've just got to stress that I want the character to be important, and the more stock you place on how well somebody can operate a mouse and keyboard, the less important the character becomes. Now, the underlying theme of a lot of your arguments, Wolf, is that games like WoW or EverQuest or whatever don't require a lot of skill on the player's part. And I think anybody who's actually taken WoW more seriously than just a casual player can tell you there is a lot of skill required to be damn good at World of Warcraft. A lot of skill. There's a lot more skill involved at getting good at WoW than there is at getting good at The Legend of Zelda, which is a classic old action RPG. But at the same time, it's not all about just narrowing it down to how well I can move the mouse. Now, Nelson says, Deus Ex didn't have levels, but I think the RPG elements were really well put together. I'm not arguing the values and numbers when applied to specific skills. I'm just not convinced that an overarching number should affect you as greatly as it does in other RPGs. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. All I'm saying is that there needs to be growth and progression from a lesser character to a greater character throughout gameplay, and that should be quantifiable in some form. No matter what you call that, no matter how you define that, it's going to come down in the end to being a level system. You can say that you hate the way level systems are done, and that's fine, but you're going to wind up with one, I think, as soon as you want your character to grow. It may not be like any other level system.
Premise, sir.
I'm sorry?
I don't know how else to explain it, but I think
you disagree with it because I've used the word level. You've made that abundantly clear because you're contradicting yourself, Gav. I love you to death, but you have
really
said
not.
No. You have.
I'm saying I don't want one big number. It doesn't make any sense.
And I'm telling you that it's going to be there, whether you want it there or not. As soon as you want there to be growth, and you want that growth to be quantifiable, the very root of the word quantifiable is to have a number.
No, lots of little numbers I have no problem with.
Those little numbers are going to add up to something. Even if your quote unquote, okay, not level, even if your marshmallow was made up of 57 different tiny numbers that all derived itself from the skills that you had, At some point, somebody somewhere is going to stop and go, wait a minute, you can add all these together and come up with a single number that gives an idea of how powerful or how far your character's progressed. I'm just saying that from a fundamental way, as soon as your character has to grow and you try to quantify that growth, you have a level system, whether you want it or not. And I know that you're saying, well, if there's a level system, damn it, I'm folding my arms up, I'm taking my toys, and I'm going home because I don't want it.
But do you think that should directly be related to, should you get things for reaching levels then?
Not necessarily, but under what circumstances
stuff?
would you like to see somebody get more stuff if it's not levels?
I would put it on a very granular skill system.
Yeah, but as I've already said, isn't that really granular skill system? Couldn't you really just fundamentally take that down and boil it down to a level anyway?
No, only in terms of something to show to the on screen, but not in terms of apply, because having a change becoming level, going from level to n plus 1 implies that all of a sudden you're better at X, Y, Z. That's what I don't like.
You're missing my point.
Jump.
I'm not saying that level has to be the determining factor. If you want to say that your skills are what make you more powerful, again, for the 57th time, as an easy-to-see quantification for those who need some clear form of how far they have progressed as a character. The more you break it up and say, well, your progression is actually the result of 157 different numbers that define your skills.
None of that should be shown to the player, from my point of view. I don't think that is what.
Then we go back to the original argument. Yeah, we go back to the original argument that you don't want the player to have any indication of their growth.
No, they should have. They'll have indication of their growth because they've got because they can explore more, they know more people, they've got a better living environment, they've fallen in love, they've met in the same way it happens in the real world.
That's very cloudy and ethereal and doesn't have a solid quantification. I do believe that you need some sort of quantification for progress. I believe that. I really do.
Even if I was going to pick a guy that had been taking martial arts for many years to go into Nashville and get into a bar fight and kick some ass, I'm going to use a level system in picking out which of these martial arts guys I'm going to take. I'm going to take the guy that's got the black belt that's been working at it for many, many, many years, as opposed to the guy who's been in it for one day.
I think it's just...
That's the skill system.
Tomatoes, yes.
Not tomatoes. That's the point. This level, the whole thing is you reach a new level. It's a completely meaningless abstraction. It really, you say there's some people, and again, this comes down to just people want something to show off. You would pick the person who's best at the martial arts. You wouldn't pick the person who's highest level because they might be crap at martial arts.
But it's not worth arguing with you. I don't think they would have been given the black belt.
That's what I fundamentally don't see.
They should not have been given the black belt if they did not earn it.
That's the skill system. That's being good at martial arts.
I'm about to start kicking people. I sure hope not to have to do that. Spam the channel again. You're out. Say again now.
Sorry, I thought you were.
No, not you. No.
No. Okay, yeah. What I'm saying is that is fundamental to what I'm trying to say. It's in that exact example you gave. You're looking for the best martial artist. You're not looking for necessarily the highest level person.
But I'm gonna start.
You're looking at their skill. You're not looking at their level.
Look what Mike SDK said. Those skills added up to him getting a black belt, a level.
No, because the whole level thing. Yes.
He just walked in and paid for it?
No, listen. Zach is saying that a level, a marshmallow, is an overarching summation of everything. Therefore, that isn't him getting a level, a black belt. It's him getting some
Hang
indication.
on. Equinox, this is a good time for you to just disconnect because I don't think you remember what you typed I agree to at the very beginning of this class. Because I said this is exactly what would happen. And if you can't stomach it, then you don't need to be in here. Okay, Gavin, continue.
Well, I think that's my fundamental thing. Although, yes, all right, you've got a lot of numbers. You can add them up and make one big number. You could even divide it down and get an average, which is essentially what a level system boils down to, more or less, in terms of what number to show the player. But my point is, you wouldn't. It seems a meaningless abstraction to me, an unnecessary one, in that you.
Thank you, Judge. See, there's a couple of people that at least see what I'm getting at, because I do believe skill. Hey,
it quantifies his skill. There's nothing about his overall, the fact that he's no good with women has no effect on his ability in martial arts. That means it's tied to the skill. It's not an overall level thing.
No, the belt is a level. His skill is how well he kicks, how well he punches, how well he blocks. Those are skills. His takedowns, his sweeps, his grappling abilities, those are skills. His rank inside of a martial art is a level. Are you a blue belt, a brown belt, a black belt? What level Dan are you if you've got multiple levels?
This is where it comes down to the semantic thing, because that isn't what Zach's described a level as being.
Okay.
See, the cool thing with levels. The cool thing with levels, though, is it's a way that you can compare with your friends very easily. Instead of going down, I'm 32 in marksmanship, I'm 47 in hand-to-hand combat.
That's probably the problem, because the first question that all of my RPG friends would ask is, so what? Let's see what you're good at and what you're not. No, it's. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, when you get to a point where you have to design quests or design zones or design instances, how are you as a designer? Instances. I'm not even going to get into how much I disagree with
that's later.
But how are you going to tailor that content to players? Because if you don't have a quick reference, you can't be sure that a particular group of players or a particular individual will be able to complete it. It's the same problem I have with giving players too much choice.
This is an example to me of gaming and the nanny state almost. Do you know what I mean? It's you're saying it comes down to the inability in Rift to solo is the prime example of this. What's that dungeon? The first one we come to there, where you need to be level 18 to go in and do it. I've forgotten the question I was answering.
You're just saying anybody should be able to just go in there?
Yes, because the whole point is you should be able to go in there and get your ass whopped and handed to you on a plate and thrown back out the door, as would happen if I went and started a fight in a gym.
Yeah, and
you don't, and again, that's what I mean by it being sort of a nanny state idea, in that you're basically removing choice from the player. The player should have the choice to do something, so dummy gets dead, frankly.
But that kind of experience,
that's how you learn.
Subjective. Yeah, that kind of experience makes people put down the game and walk away, which is the last thing we want.
See, on the contrary, I would disagree fundamentally with that. The idea that the people who wrote the game have given me enough rope to hang myself indicates that they've at least respected me enough to allow me my own ability to make a decision.
We did, Gavin. We did go in there at a lower rank that we shouldn't have been there, and we did get our asses handed to me. I remember quite clearly you screaming and yelling and putting your pen up.
And it was great.
But wait, what?
Because there was the idea that we were struggling and we were only just managing to get.
But I'm saying that, we were allowed in there. We definitely weren't where we should be, and we did get our asses handed to us, and it was great.
The reason I used that particular place in the example just then was because I said as a single player. It stops you going through as a single player because of the missions that you need to get through there to finish.
Yeah, but think of it from a research point of view.
That's the soloing versus not soloing thing. I can kind of see why they did that. Their whole vibe was it's all about groups, but the plain fact of it is that you lot were mostly either busy or asleep when I wanted to play it. and I don't like playing with strangers. I'm quite happy playing in a group with people I know, but I don't particularly want to go in and deal with morons.
Yeah, but Gavin, that's more of a resource allocation type thing, because that is an instance, which means it has to allocate so many server resources.
Yeah.
Just for
getting away
that.
From the discussion we're having at the moment, but I would imagine that would be. I don't know how tight you want to keep this. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you right across you there. Sorry,
No.
But I sort of bad example on my part, really. What I was getting at was is that the fact that we were struggling to get through that, and that I died. I've been in there about 4 times before with different combinations, and had died at various points. But I had the option to choose to get in there and die. I didn't have the game. The people saying you can't go there. I did like the way, for instance, they'd handled the crossing of the river, the crossing of the water, because on the opposite side of the little sea. Outside the first area, it's all sort of level 50 plus stuff, and you are quite welcome to go there, and you just got beaten to a pulp in about 3.5 microseconds.
Yes, we did.
But it let you get there. So
Yeah.
it points to them for that. So and see, this has gone way off where we were. I can't remember.
No, because it's still closely related.
Ask me.
I was just saying.
So
I was just saying
so
that you need to.
basically, you don't stop people doing that. You basically just let them learn.
Yes, but no,
Okay,
you're
put up the
kind of
sign
missing
saying-
my point. You're kind of missing my point.
Well,
It's not saying to a player, you can't come here because you're not level X. If you're designing it, you have in your mind a progression that your player needs to go through. If you have no sort of quick reference number or something along those lines, that you can't design a progression. You just design individual zones that theoretically have for example, in D&D, if the creatures in the monster manual didn't have some sort of challenge rating, I think they were called, or if a door,
but that was only
D&D
to
have a
enable
difficulty
the
check.
weak and feeble and slow to calculate human mind in adding up numbers. This is the full advantage you can take of a computer, is that you can have a stat system that is. I mean, this is the thing. You look at 4th
No,
and they've jumped away from 3.5 ed again. The whole idea of having millions of stats. You can base the whole thing at a level that the human mind can barely comprehend, because you've got the calculation power available to do it. But you don't need to. You're right. I've lost the point.
Okay, and with that, hold the thought. This is exactly a good spot for us to take a break, because we're right at an hour. So for those, time flies when you're killing each other. For those that want to go to the bathroom, get some coffee or whatever, or need to go to bed, now's the time. And we'll be back here in the next part in just a minute. Thank you very much.